Welcome to Quiltripping Travel with Rose, a Big Blend radio podcast featuring award-winning travel writer and photographer Rose Palmer. So welcome, everyone. We are going to continue talking about Alaska with Rose. She just came back from an epic road trip. I mean, she did so much in Alaska. I think she was gone for like a month. I'm just a tad jealous, but today she's going to tell us about her road trips. She went to the Yukon, and there's just a lot to talk about. And so, of course, she's got some great articles up on her site all about Alaska. One is about her stay at the Tincup Wilderness. This lodge she stayed at, the Tincup Wilderness Lodge. Like, when I talk about being jealous, y'all, I am just saying. And she had internet there in the middle of nowhere, because I remember getting an email from her going, I have internet. I have the most pristine nature, wildlife. This is the best place ever. And I'd never thought she was going to come home. But how are you? How's it going, Rose?
I'm good. I did not want to come home. They were living my dream, honestly. But it was a lot of work for them. It was not any work for me as a guest. But yeah, we can talk about that in a bit. But I'm good. So I'm back from, as you mentioned, an epic time in Alaska. We talked about my 3-week cruise, with a special, unique itinerary with Princess last time. And then after the cruise, my husband met me up in Anchorage, and then we started a 3-week road trip through Alaska and primarily the Yukon. So the focus on this trip was mostly eventually getting into the Yukon, because we had been to Alaska and driven quite a bit of it as our first post-COVID trip. But we still did some things in Alaska. We actually started from Anchorage. Before picking up our car, we flew out to Katmai National Park, which is one of Alaska's 8 national parks, most of which cannot be driven to. I think only 2 you can drive to, if I remember correctly. So Katmai is across the inlet there from Anchorage, and we were staying at a place called Kulik Lodge in the park, which was set up back in the 50s as a fly-in fishing lodge. And then once it became a national park, it was grandfathered in as one of the places you can stay there. And we went there because that's where my husband literally got hooked on fly fishing when we were there last time. Yeah, he wanted to try it again. And Katmai National Park is best known for Brooks Camp and Brooks Falls, which people may not be familiar with the name, but I'm sure they've seen photos and videos of bears standing on, a little waterfall and just opening their mouths and the salmon, jumping into their mouth. And more than likely, that's where it was filmed, was at Brooks Falls. And Brooks Camp is run by the national park. It has cabins that you can rent, but it's on a lottery system. So I think you have to apply something like 2 years in advance if you want to stay there. And it's right by the trails and the boardwalk for going to go see the bears. So while he was fishing, they flew me out in a little float plane from Kulik Lodge over to Brooks Camp. It was about a 20-minute flight. And I spent a day watching the bears, which were just, I just can't, I never tire of that. It's amazing watching them and being able to get so close to them and not really having to worry about them interacting with us because they're much too busy eating and feasting.
This is amazing, because I want to back up on this. The fact is, they flew you there, so you've got. So this is a whole. She dumped the boat for the plane or the helicopters, right? Are they?
It's Alaska, so this was a prop. So from Anchorage to Kulik Lodge, it was a 20-seater prop plane. So they have their own little airfield, a gravel airfield, and then they also have float planes to get around, because it is primarily a fishing lodge, and so they like to fly their guests to wherever they want to go fishing within the national park, and then also over to Brooks Camp for fishing and for bear viewing. But I mean, it's Alaska. A lot of Alaska is inaccessible by road. There really are only a few major highways in Alaska for as big as the state is. And the rest of it you fly into, or you take a boat, or you take a ferry, or a helicopter, or, whatever, or you hike, or dog sled in the winter, I guess. But yeah, quite a few of the national parks in Alaska actually are not easily accessible. And this is one of them. And then Lake Clark, which is sort of also nearby, which is another national park, same thing. If you want to go visit it, you've got to fly in. So yeah, so we started our trip with that, and he did some fishing and I did bear viewing. And then, that was just a couple of days. And then we went back to Anchorage and rented a car. And now I need to talk to you about car renting in Alaska, depending on where you want to go. When we did our trip back in 2021, we just got a normal rental car at, whatever. I don't remember if it was Avis or Hertz, but just one of the big, agencies. And they specifically will tell you that there are specific roads they don't want you to take their cars on. So basically, if it's not a paved highway, they don't want you taking their car on there.
Okay, that's good to know.
Well, we pushed the rules a little bit.
Will you be telling this on the air? Are you going to get something in the mail?
So this is what I'm telling people, is because we did drive a couple of the gravel roads. So, we wanted to go down to another national park, which is Wrangell St. Elias, and the road, it only has 2 roads, and they're both gravel. And the McCarthy Road is one of the ones that they will tell you they don't want you taking their car on. Now, that said, we saw a lot of sedans and cars on that road, but we did end up on that first trip having 2 flat tires. So we had to deal with that while we were traveling, and we dealt with it. So this time around, knowing that we were going where we were going and having armed with this information, and also knowing that we were going into Canada. So it turned out, I gave my husband the task of finding a rental car for us. And so when he started looking into it, some of the companies didn't even want you taking the cars into Canada at all, even if you were returning it back into Anchorage. So he spent actually quite a bit of time researching. And we ended up going with a company called Go North, who rents both cars and a lot of RVs. They're actually better known for their RVs. And they have offices in Anchorage and in Whitehorse and Fairbanks, I believe. So they have they had the support system so that if something did happen along the way, they would be able to come out and help us. Now, granted, all those towns are far away from where we were at, so it would take a while. But the bottom line is that they had no problems with us driving on the Denali Highway or the McCarthy Highway or any back roads or gravel roads or anything like that, or going into Canada. Just something, and the other road that we took, which was the top of the world highway up in Canada from Dawson City back into Alaska, was also a gravel road. I mean, it was a very good road, well maintained but on the Canadian side, it was gravel, and it didn't become paved until we hit the U.S. Definitely something if you're planning a road trip and you're planning on kind of going a little bit off the beaten path in Alaska, which is well worth it. Gorgeous scenery. The Denali Highway, especially from, I don't know why it's called a highway because at one time that was the only way to get over to Denali, but now they've got the paved roads. But especially the eastern side of it is just some gorgeous scenery. So it's well worth doing these kind of off the beaten path roads, but definitely would recommend going with a company that lets you take their cars on their roads and gives you the support for them.
Well, sometimes you're driving and all of a sudden you end up on a dirt road and your GPS doesn't even tell you.
Exactly.
I mean, I did that in the middle of the night somewhere in the middle of Missouri, and that was it took us to a place we didn't think we were going. That's all I can say. That was fun. It was, I just was like, this looks pretty, and you get out of the car and then all the mosquitoes get you and they're like, look, fresh meat. So I think sometimes that just happens. So it's good to have the right one. So I think that's really a good trip. But so your road trip did Alaska and a bit of Canada. So was it that the road wove into Canada or?
So yes.
Over?
So both. So we specifically wanted to drive part of what's called the Alcan Highway, which technically starts in Delta Junction, Alaska, and goes down to Dawson Creek, British Columbia, not to be confused with Dawson City, Yukon, which is somewhere else completely different. So it connects Alaska to Canada. We only did a portion of it. So we didn't start it at Delta Junction. We actually connected to the Alcan Highway in the town of Tok, Alaska, and we picked it up there. And then we drove it to Whitehorse, Yukon, which is the capital of the Yukon. And then in Whitehorse, Yukon, we wound our way back north on a different road to Dawson City, which was established during the gold rush. And then from Dawson City, we looped back into Alaska via the top of the world highway that I mentioned. So we did this big loop, and my main resource, and I highly recommend this for anybody planning any kind of trip in Alaska, especially a road trip, is this book called The Milepost. And it's this really, it's almost like the old fashioned yellow pages, which most, a lot of people don't really know what those are anymore. But it's sort of that thin kind of newsprint paper. It's really fat. They update it every year, and it's information about everything in all the areas in Alaska and in Canada, and specifically information about the roads, where to stay, what to see, where to camp, where you can find a restaurant, where you can find a gas station, where, shopping, just, any kind of fishing. It has, it'll tell you if you're into fishing, like what lakes or rivers are available for public fishing, that kind of thing. So for anybody that wants to do an RV trip in Alaska, or even just like we did a road trip and stay in lodges, it's an invaluable resource. And even if you're in Southeast Alaska on a cruise, it has information about all the locations down there as well, in terms of what to see and what to do. Cool. So it's it was a great resource for planning our trips. So highly recommend using that.
Cool. We used to have, in South Africa, we had this book. It was done by Reader's Digest. It was called Off the Beaten Path, or Off the Beaten Track. And when we were touring, we were on the road there for about a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. And that was like a Bible, but it was thick. It was a hardcover book, but it really let us know about every park. And it just had the maps, some lodging kind of stuff, but that we had guides from SATOR, South African Tourism Association. Remember, like with those little grids, like you get a dot if it has a campground, you get a dot if it's got a hotel. I love
kind
those.
Like I said, it's a little pricey. It was $49, but for me, it was well worth. And yes, that information is on the web. But requires a lot more work sometimes to find some of this, and some of it actually may not be on the web. So,
and you might not have Wi-Fi if you're on a road trip in the middle of the wilderness. See, that's the thing. This is remote, right? Where you were going.
Yes,
remote.
So the lodges all had Wi-Fi, but in between, we didn't necessarily have cell service, and it's not because I don't have a plan. I'm on T-Mobile, so I have cell service anywhere I am in the world as long as there's a tower nearby. We were driving in wilderness. So as undeveloped as Alaska is, the Yukon is even more so. It was amazing. So, as an example, Wrangell St. Elias, that mountain range straddles both countries. So on the Alaska side, it's called Wrangell St. Elias National Park. And as I mentioned, there are two dirt roads that go into it. One is the McCarthy Road, which is sort of the main national park road that you drive for about 60 miles to the town of McCarthy, where you can stay in McCarthy, or then you can drive a little further to and stay at Tincup Lodge, which is the only lodging accommodation in the park. The other road is further northeastish. It's also a dirt road, and it's on the edge of the park, and it's called Nabezna Road. And we took that one on this trip, and that's where we started. That's where we spent our 4th of July, was at a little cabin on about 25 miles inland inside off that road. But then that mountain range on the Canadian side. So my point is that, while it may not seem developed by lower 48 national park standards, it's got some facilities. We went over to the Canadian side, and on the Canadian side, it's called Kluane National Park, and it basically had nothing. There was one tiny little visitor center that was, smaller than an RV, with information. A few trails, and that was it. No roads into the park, pretty much undeveloped. And not that you can't do anything in the park. We actually met a couple that were guides that had some time off, and they were going canoeing. They had some inflatable, I guess, kayaks, and they were planning a 5-day backcountry trip with their inflatable kayaks and backpacks and all that. But you need permits. You need permits from the rangers. You got to tell them where you're going, when to expect you out. You better have your bear spray. We bought bear spray when we were in Alaska because, even just, if we were going to take a small little walk to the edge of the creek,
you never know.
You just never know. So we had it with us. We didn't need it. The bears I saw were all far away at at Katmai National Park, or, like looking down from the road down to the river or something far away. But yeah, we had it with us. But yeah, the Yukon is nicely undeveloped. I was very more surprised by that than I thought I would be. Yeah. And even the towns are, you blink and you miss it.
My kind of style, honestly.
So another thing is, especially once we got into the Yukon, and anytime we passed through somewhere that had a gas station, didn't matter if we were down only a quarter tank, we filled up, because you just, you never know how many hours. I mean, we'd know how many hours it was, but, kind of just in case kind of thing.
Oh, see, that's a rule. We have you get anywhere near a half a tank, you fill. You never know. And we get on stupid roads. And this goes especially for New Mexico. Okay. I'm just going to say there are certain areas, and that is one where you want to fill up if you go off in the boonies like we do, because it could be like a long time and you never know, so it's always good to do that. But isn't it really thrilling to be out in the boonies? Like, there's some things coming here and there, but really that's like a true adventure, Rose.
Yes and no. It's so that couple that were going out backcountry, that's an adventure, right?
Sure.
I can't do that anymore. I can't, I can't even do the RV, just because I don't want to drive something that big and figure out where to park it, and just it's small, and it's too small and confined. I just can't deal with that anymore. So, we were looking for places to stay, and it was a challenge to find places to stay that were sort of on our path, and that were within a 3 or 4 hour driving distance from one day to the next, and that were nicer. I know I have a high standards. I didn't want to be staying in a hostel type of accommodation, but I found them. There's lodges, even though I was planning this sort of last minute, which means within a couple of months, and when we were leaving, I was able to find places to stay that had openings and that had, kind of met my requirements. But it definitely took some effort, because they're few and far between. I start by opening up Google Maps and clicking on the hotels tab, and then looking to see where all the little blue dots show up. And there's some sections in the Yukon where there is nothing. When we're driving from Whitehorse up to Dawson City. So Whitehorse is the capital. It's it's a nice it's a city, but it's not a big city. The downtown is maybe a couple of streets in each direction, kind of thing. Quaint little city. Looks very livable, if it wasn't so cold.
Yeah.
But from there up to Dawson City, it was like a 7-hour drive. And I mean, I know that's nothing for you, because you do that all the time, but I didn't, wasn't sure what time our hosts from Tincup Wilderness Lodge were dropping us off, and how much time I would have. So, I didn't want to be driving 7 hours. So I had a hard time finding a place to stay within like 4 to 5 hours, but I did find something.
I mean, so it's definitely planning. Don't just wing it, because it is the roughs out there. Be prepared. So this is a very good podcast for those preparing, because it's going to set you up to, because especially going there, it's a trek to go to Alaska, and then it's a bucket list for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to waste that opportunity in that time by, not having planned and all of that.
Exactly.
I'm very excited, and I know listeners are going to love to hear about Tincup Wilderness Lodge.
Oh my God.
I could live there. I could live there, I believe.
To give you an idea of how much I liked it, I want to go back. I don't go back to too many places that I've been to, because I like to try new things. But this was one place where I would happily go back. It was perfect for me. It was absolutely perfect. So it's out in the wilderness in the Yukon, on this lake called Tincup Lake, and there's no roads to it. So you're flying in, whether it's a float plane, or as we went in, because it was just the two of us, on the owner's helicopter. He picked us up. So the owners are Swiss and German. So Meinrad is Swiss, and his wife Katrin is German. They bought the lodge back in 2010. The lodge was actually first built in 69 and has had a number of different owners in the meantime. I'll have an article on my website about my experience there, and it includes some of the history. But they're the current owners, and Meinrad is an architect, and he had spent quite a bit of time in the Yukon and in Alaska and in the Arctic region, just on his holidays, doing all sorts of adventurous things. He had some very fascinating stories about his youth, but he had always, as his quote unquote easy early retirement project, had always wanted to get some type of a lodge in the Yukon. So he heard that Tincup was available for sale, and he bought it sight unseen. Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
I know. And then once he went to look at it, basically, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with it before he even got back to Switzerland. He told us he had, all the plans, everything mostly drafted out, and knew exactly what he wanted to do. And, he's an architect and he's Swiss. So, we know what Swiss watches are like, right?
Yeah.
The ultimate
he's with
perfection.
it.
So just translate that to a lodge experience, that level of detail and perfection. And then his wife is German, and we know what German cars are like. So between the two of them, everything was absolutely perfect and neat and orderly and pretty to look at. And as a result, because there was no clutter, there was no visual clutter, everything was just scenically blended together, the cabins and even their day-to-day stuff that they used. So after being there for a day or two, I noticed that there's a cabin, and I thought it was another guest cabin, and I asked him about it. He said, "Oh no, that's where I keep my batteries for the solar power in my generator. Come, let me show you." So it wasn't, this was not a hut. It was another beautiful cabin that looked just like the other cabins, that fit in beautifully into the environment. And that's where all his battery packs were that were charged by his solar panels. And that's where he kept his generator if he needed some backup power. And it was just beautiful. And then next to it was his wood storage shed. And I hate to call it a shed because it was much prettier than a shed. But, that's where they kept all their wood as it was aging and drying, and their ATV was parked there and all. it was just, it was just a beautiful property. And then he had a sauna and a hot tub, which was kind of on the other side of the creek bigger than a creek but smaller than a river. I don't know what you'd call that stream. Across the stream, that emptied into the lake. So on one side of that stream was the lodge and the cabins, and then on the other side, on this little promontory, was the sauna and the hot tub. Well, you had to get to that hot sauna and hot tub somehow. So he built these two beautiful bridges. Again, just really added aesthetically to the whole setting.
Wow. You have the chairs on the lake that you can sit out there. Like on that little dock jetty thing.
And he built those. So he built the chairs. He designed the furniture. Wow. So he couldn't find furniture that fit the aesthetic that he wanted for his cabins and his lodge. So he designed everything, had it built in Switzerland or manufactured in Switzerland. And then they shipped a container with the furniture, with the mattresses, with the towels, with the bedding, with the pillows, with all the things that they wanted to use to decorate the cabins, and then also for their lifestyle there. They had it shipped from Switzerland over to the Yukon, and then it had to be flown in. So, and then he did upgrades to the cabins and expansions and put in new cabins. So, all of that, and the boats. So he's got fishing boats. He had some kayaks and paddle boards, and the ATV I mentioned, and all of that, and solar panels, little greenhouse. All of that had to be flown in. And then the labor, so if he's putting up new cabins or expanding, you need, because he bought the plans and kind of not kits, but sort of prefab stuff from a company out in Vancouver that made these types of cabins, so somebody had to come and put it together, because you can't just have one person doing it. They did a lot on their own, but they also, had help. And so they had some big planes dropping stuff off, and, he had to, after their 30 years of usage, had accumulated. I don't want to call it trash, but just, because you can't, everything has to be flown out. So things had accumulated on the property. So he had to clean up and take all that trash away. And
Wow.
So it took them 7 years. They opened up in I think in 2017, he said. So they had 2 good seasons before COVID hit them. Uh, and then during COVID, they
Yeah,
lived there.
they're the ones that are safe from COVID.
Well, but they had to figure out how to live there in the winter. So the water, has to come, it gets pumped in from the lake and then it gets purified via UV light. And it's, I had all the comforts of home. So mind you, I'm in the middle of nowhere, right? There's no roads, there's no other lodges, there's no other buildings. I'm not even talking within sight, but within miles and miles and miles and miles. So the water, it was pumped in and we had flush toilets. We had hot and cold on-demand running water, showers, electric outlets in the cabins. So I had no problem charging my electronics, light.
Wow. Did they do it all from solar?
Yeah, pretty much. So he had a backup generator, but for the most part, at least in the summertime,
This
when there
reminds me
wasn't.
of Africa. When you go out in the boonies, there's nothing for miles other than wildlife and trees and the plains,
Yeah,
depending on where
yep.
you are. And you get to this lodge and here's fresh pineapple and grown on the premises. Everything's run by solar. I mean, it's just this incredible, like luxurious, but not over the top look, just well done.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like they have that kind of style and the attention to detail, and then they're
Yes.
living off the land with their greenhouse and
Yep.
and then fishing. I mean, I don't know. When I looked at all your pictures and I was reading the article, and everyone, the link is in the episode notes for Rose's article. I'm telling you, I'm like, this is like when we talk about a piece of heaven. That
Mhm.
is it. I
It
mean, and
is.
I was
It
looking at your
was.
photos. Oh my gosh, everyone. I think we're gonna have to make a video. Like the photos. I know we're gonna talk more about Alaska, so I think we're gonna have to make one big video of all your Alaska experience. How long were you in Alaska? Like in total?
So this for me, the whole trip was 6 weeks, 3 weeks on the so the whole thing was 6 weeks. Huge state. It's a huge state. So, and even and this was our second time there for a long amount of time. I've done a few other cruises, which in Southeast Alaska, but it's a really, 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 really big state. And even at that, I don't feel like I know I haven't seen it all. There's parts I haven't seen and I need to go back to because they're not easy to get to. And then there's these parts of Canada, which is pretty much almost the same kind of thing. The Yukon is the second least populated territory in Canada. The only other one that has, fewer people and only by a few thousand is their Northwest Territories, which is like, we're talking the Arctic Circle, right? So, you can fly into Whitehorse, and then if you want to explore the Yukon by itself without doing Alaska. So we kind of did it the hard way because we went from Anchorage. We drove 2,700 miles in 3 weeks, which again I know for you that's not a big deal, but that was a lot. But you could fly
It is
into
a lot.
Whitehorse. Yeah, you can fly into Whitehorse and then rent a car there and kind of do a loop around the Yukon or just see the main parts of Yukon if you want. Or just go to Tincup Wilderness Lodge. We'll pick you up in Whitehorse, drive you to 3 hours to Burwash Landing, and then from there fly the 30 minutes to the lodge, which is what I want to do next time because I do want to go back. And next time I want to go back in maybe like late August, early September when we can see the northern lights there because they are visible there. But yeah, and I also highly recommend that folks look at their Instagram account because they have animals,
Like
around
that
them.
lynx. Ooh.
Yeah. So they have trail cams set up behind the lodge in different parts. They've got some, and then if an animal comes and happens to walk by the lodge, Einrod is a photographer as well and has this, huge 600 millimeter lens that he was showing me and I was drooling over. And so if he sees something, his camera's ready to go and he starts shooting. So he's got some amazing photos of lynx and bears and moose and just all sorts of the animals that over the years they've seen and have come by the lodge. So we had a bear visiting us while we were there early one morning. The lynx, obviously, that the trail cam picked up. The bald eagle would follow us as we went out on the boat to try and go fishing because he's learned that if people are on a boat fishing, that there's always
Yep.
leftovers after, after you fillet the fish, right? So yeah, just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous setting. And we were the only two there. So they can handle up to 10 guests, but they like to keep it more personal if possible. And so it was just the two of us. So it was extremely personal
Oh, wow.
service. It was more like visiting family,
Oh,
right?
nice.
If you're fortunate enough to have somebody who has a place like that and you get to go visit them, it felt more like that than being a guest at a hotel.
Oh,
And great food. Katrin, cooked everything from scratch, all homemade, just good home cooking, just good quality, beautifully presented, all fresh ingredients. So if they didn't grow it, then they'd fly it in. If they didn't grow it or catch it, then it was flown in from Whitehorse. But yeah,
but I
really a
saw in your
fantastic
article
experience.
that she made pizza.
She made
So I had
pizza.
to bring this up because we have this shared love of pizza. Maybe not hamburgers, but pizza. We know that now. The pizza part. So I'm
Yep.
going, I mean, did she
Pizza
bake
Friday.
it yeah, did she, it is Pizza Friday today. Obviously we're recording this on Friday, but every Friday is a pizza day. Every day could be a pizza day, even for
Yes.
breakfast. Don't start
Yes.
me. I'm off and running. But I was going to ask, what was her pizza like? I mean, because
It was good.
what's
It was very
interesting to
good.
me is she's doing everything. So, like, do they go in and ship in cheese? I mean,
Yeah.
they have to go
Oh, yeah.
fly and get those kinds of things.
Yep.
Then
Yep.
the vegetables and fruit are whatever she grows, and then the fish is right there.
Right,
And
right.
that's,
So
wow.
yeah, so the veggies are, it's cold weather veggies. So we're talking lettuces and
Yeah.
those kinds of things. And then any other fruits or veggies, they fly out about every 2 or 3 weeks to Whitehorse and bring things in. There's actually a really good cheese shop, it turns out, in Whitehorse that has all sorts of imported international cheeses. So, they'll frequent them. They're very picky about the quality of the food that they serve. So there were always quite a few comments about, yeah, we tried this elk sausage and we didn't like it. So then we tried a different butcher and didn't like his. And then eventually we found one that we liked. So they're very particular about the quality. If they don't like it, they don't serve it, kind of thing.
I like that though, because it's, again, attention to detail, but they're trying to do the ultimate best, it sounds like.
Right. Homemade soups every day, fresh salads with, the lettuce having gotten picked every day. She made schnitzel, which, took me back
Oh,
to, my mother made it.
mm.
So just really fantastic experience.
No one
Yeah.
is going to complain about schnitzel, man. There's something about, I'm just saying, right?
No, how can you,
It's
breaded chicken cutlet, how can you go wrong?
okay. This is a bad day. We're just going to be hungry all day today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but isn't that amazing? You're out in the middle of the wilderness having this incredible experience and
Right.
being calm, and just even to pick up a book and just read a little
Oh,
bit in the
yeah.
scenery, just even to have a morning cup of coffee out there would
Hmm.
be a treat.
It felt so calm, like you said, and relaxing and serene because there was no noise. I mean, you don't realize how
Mm.
much noise is in your daily life from all the stuff in your house in the background and the airplanes above you and the cars and just, everything until you're someplace like that where there's no sounds other than the birds or, the tinkling of the stream. Or the rustle of the leaves. And then once you're in that setting, at least for me, I just felt myself relaxing and just getting so calm and just breathing out these huge sighs of, because all that
Wow.
that daily, hustle and bustle that we have, at least I have around, my daily life wasn't there, but yet it was so comfortable, I didn't have to be in a tent. I didn't have to hike for 20 miles to get it.
Mm.
Um, I can't do that kind of stuff anymore. It was fine when I was in my 20s, but I just can't do that anymore. So now to be able to be in a environment like that was so wild and yet still be really comfortable and sleep on a bed and have pillows and have a duvet, I can do without the light. I can do without Wi-Fi. I mean, they need Wi-Fi for their work and all, which is why they had such good Wi-Fi. But, be able to take a shower and a flush toilet and have good food and yet be in that type of a wilderness setting was just fantastic.
Wow. Amazing. We can't wait to hear about your next adventure in Alaska. So everyone, August is American Adventures Month, and that means all the Americas. So South America, North America, Mexico, Latin America, all of that. And so this is definitely part of that celebration. It's also National Parks Month. So it's always good to hear about our national parks that are the remote, hard to get ones. And I know Rose does a really good job going to those remote places and finding a place where she can be remote and take a shower and have pizza.
Well, so done with Alaska I could talk more about Alaska for a long time, but for next month, I just came back. So after Alaska, came back from the Alaska Yukon trip. I was home for a day and a half, and then I was on a preview media trip for the Rocky Mountaineer. So I think everyone's very familiar with the Rocky Mountaineer train trips through Canada. And in 2021, they started a 2-day train trip in the American Southwest. And now they're expanding this train trip. It's going to be 3 days. And this was a preview for that 3-day trip. And it started in Salt Lake City, went to Denver, and they will be rebranding. So in the U.S., the rebrand will be Canyon Spirit starting next summer. So for this year, it's still called Rocky Mountaineer in the U.S. Starting next summer, it will be called the Canyon Spirit, and they will be offering both this 3-day trade trip called Rockies to the Red Rocks, as well as the 2-day one that they do now. So I will be talking all about my experience on that. It was, besides boats, I love trains as well, and I've done quite a few nice trains in the past, and really enjoyed this one. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Quiltripping Travel with Rose, a Big Blend radio podcast featuring award-winning travel writer and photographer Rose Palmer. Join us for new episodes every second Thursday, and keep up with Rose at quiltripping.com and follow us at bigblendradio.com.